For a long time, there was a word that made people stop, think, and even change their lives, a word that wasn't used to scare but to alert. Today, that word is hardly ever spoken anymore, not because it's ceased to be true, but because it's become too uncomfortable. The silence began small, almost imperceptible. First they stopped explaining, then mentioning it, and now many pretend it never existed. But when a powerful truth is pushed into silence, something is very wrong. Imagine a huge warning written in red letters right in front of you. Now imagine someone putting a cloth over it, saying, "Don't look at that, it's not important. The danger remains, even if no one talks about it." That's exactly what happened to one of the clearest warnings in the Bible. It wasn't erased from the pages, but it was erased from conversations. And when the warning disappears, people walk calmly, straight to error. The Bible has never changed its words. What has changed is the courage to repeat them. Experts, scholars, and spiritual leaders agree on something unsettling. The less certain truths are discussed, the easier it becomes to ignore them. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It only makes the impact greater when the reality is revealed. Perhaps you've never stopped to think about it. Perhaps someone has already said it was an exaggeration, a metaphor, or something from the past. But what if it isn't? What if silence isn't protection, but a dangerous deception? The fear you feel now doesn't come from invented stories, but from the possibility that something very serious has been overlooked. Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to wake up. The truth that was silenced is still there, waiting to be seen. And once you see it, that you can no longer pretend you didn't know. Many people say that hell is just a figure of speech. Others claim it's merely a metaphor for sadness or suffering here on earth. But when we open the Bible attentively, something becomes impossible to ignore. She doesn't speak vaguely or confusingly. The words are direct, repetitive, and intentional. And that's what most attracts the attention of scholars and experts on the subject. The Bible uses clear expressions such as eternal fire, outer darkness, and weeping and gnashing of teeth. These phrases do not appear just once, nor by chance. They emerge in different books, in different contexts, always pointing to the same destiny. And most strikingly, the person who spoke most about this was Jesus himself. He didn't tell these things as imaginary stories, but as real warnings. When someone repeatedly warns about a danger, it's because that danger exists. Now think about it. If it were just a metaphor, why use such strong words? Why repeat it so many times? Experts explain that metaphors in the Bible are usually explained soon after, but when the subject is hell, there is no symbolic explanation. There is a warning. It's like an adult warning a child, "Don't go near the fire." It's not poetry, it's caution. Some people try to say that these words were just meant to scare people, but that doesn't align with the message of love and truth taught by Jesus. To scare people without reason would be deception. To warn about something real is love. That's why scholars agree the Bible did not treat this topic as mere imagination. She treated it as a spiritual reality. And here's a question that grabs attention. If the Bible was so unclear, why do so many say today that it's nothing more than a myth? Perhaps because accepting this truth requires change. And change isn't always comfortable. But ignoring a warning doesn't make it false. It only increases the risk. Keep listening, because the more the truth is examined, the harder it becomes to pretend it was never said. There's a fact that many experts like to point out, and that almost always surprises those who hear it for the first time. Jesus spoke more often about hell than about heaven. This is not an opinion, it is a direct observation of biblical texts. And when we stop to think about it calmly, the question arises on its own: why? Jesus spoke of heaven as a promise, as hope, as reward, but he spoke of hell as notice, and warnings aren't given by chance. A warning only exists when there is real danger. Imagine a father repeatedly telling his son not to cross a busy street. He doesn't do this because he likes to scare him, but because he knows exactly what can happen if the warning is ignored. With Jesus, it was the same thing. At different times, he used strong, clear, and repeated words. He spoke of a place of loss, of separation, of spiritual suffering, not just once, but many times. If it were something irrelevant, he would have mentioned it quickly. If it were too symbolic, he would have explained it. But he returned to the subject several times in different contexts, always with the same serious tone. This continues to capture the attention of scholars to this day. And there's something even more important. Jesus never spoke of this in anger, but urgently. He warned because he cared. Every time he touched on this subject, he was saying, even without using those words, choices have consequences. And ignoring that doesn't erase the final outcome. Some people try to say that Jesus exaggerated to teach moral lessons, but experts respond with a simple question. Why exaggerate something so serious? Why insist so much on a subject that wasn't real? The more he spoke, the clearer he made it that it wasn't a bedtime story for children, but a warning for adults to wake up. And perhaps that's why this topic is so unsettling today, because if Jesus spoke so much about it, it wasn't meant to be forgotten. It was meant to be taken seriously. Many people say, a God of love would never allow hell. This phrase seems beautiful, comforting, and correct. But when we look closely at the Bible itself, we realize that it mixes two different things, love and the absence of consequences. And experts explain something important. Love isn't about pretending that choices have no consequences. Imagine a father who loves his son very much. He warns him, don't put your hand in the fire. If the son insists, the father doesn't push his hand into the fire, but he also can't extinguish the fire of the world. The warning is love. The consequence isn't malice, it's reality. Something similar happens with God. The Bible shows a God who loves, guides, calls, forgives, but also respects each person's decision. The great modern mistake is thinking that love means accepting everything without limits. But the Bible itself teaches that God doesn't force anyone to follow him. He invites. And when someone spends their entire life rejecting that invitation, choosing to live far from the truth, the final separation is no surprise. It's a continuation of that choice. Theologians explain that hell doesn't exist because God doesn't love, but because he respects. He respects human freedom so much that he doesn't force anyone to be with him forever. Heaven is communion. Hell is separation. One is freely accepted, the other is too. Perhaps this is a little frightening, but fear doesn't come from injustice. It comes from responsibility. When we understand that our choices matter, everything changes. We can no longer live on autopilot, pretending that nothing has eternal weight. And here's the point that grabs attention. If God erased all consequences, love would lose its meaning, because true love means advising, guiding, and allowing each person to decide the path they want to follow. The Bible never separated love from justice. It was humankind that tried to do so to feel more comfortable. And comfort has never been synonymous with truth. When saints and spiritual leaders spoke about hell, they didn't use poetry, exaggeration, or fancy words to impress. They used seriousness. And that's what's striking. People like Padre Pio didn't talk about this topic to cause gratuitous fear, but because they understood it, the true weight of eternity. For them, this wasn't theory, it was a warning. Father Pio said that the greatest trick of evil is not to frighten, but to convince people that there are no consequences whatsoever. Because when someone believes that everything ends here, they begin to live carelessly, without attention, without spiritual responsibility. And that is the silent danger. It is not fear that distances people from God. It is the false sense of security. The accounts related to Padre Pio show something very clear. When he spoke about hell, his tone was not one of anger, but of concern. It was like someone shouting to warn that there is an abyss just ahead. He wasn't pushing anyone, he was simply warning. And warning is an act of love. Experts who have studied his life explain that he always repeated the same simple idea. No one gets lost for lack of warning. The truth has been told. The problem is when it is ignored, and ignoring it doesn't change reality. It only changes the consciousness of those who choose not to listen. Imagine an alarm going off in a house on fire. Covering your ears doesn't put out the fire. It only prevents you from reacting in time. For Padre Pio, talking about hell was like keeping that alarm going, not to cause panic, but to save spiritual lives. Today, many try to say that these warnings were too old, too harsh, too outdated, but the truth doesn't age. What ages is the courage to face it. And perhaps that's why the words of the saints still disturb so much, because they weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to wake up. And when someone wakes up, they never see eternity in the same way again. At some point, something strange began to happen. A subject that was once treated seriously began to be avoided, not because it ceased to exist, but because it started to bother me too much. Experts in church history explain that gradually many messages were adapted to avoid causing discomfort, and that is how one of the most important warnings in the Bible began to disappear from conversations. The idea was simple: to make faith lighter, more pleasant, easier to listen to. But the problem is that truth is not born to please, it is born to guide. When we only talk about what comforts and never about what warns, the message remains incomplete. It's like teaching a child to cross the street by only talking about the flowers along the way, but never about the cars speeding by. Theologians point out that over time, a fear of alienating people arose. Therefore, difficult topics were sidelined, but the opposite of what was expected happened. Without warning, many people lost their sense of urgency. When there is no danger, there is no hurry. When there are no consequences, everything seems permissible. Hell didn't originate in the Bible. It originated in discourses, and that makes all the difference, because the Bible never presented faith as something comfortable all the time, but as something true. Truth does comfort, yes, but it also corrects, calls attention, and demands change. Imagine a doctor who avoids talking about a serious illness so as not to frighten the patient. Silence doesn't heal. On the contrary, it makes things worse. In the same way, when a spiritual warning is hidden, the soul is left without direction. Not because God stopped warning, but because someone decided not to repeat the warning. And here's the point that grabs attention. When the alert disappears, the error becomes common. What once frightened us now seems normal. What once required reflection is now ignored. And this didn't happen by chance. The question that remains is simple and unsettling. Does this silence protect, or does it deceive? Because everything that the Bible clearly tried to avoid, modern silence has ended up allowing. When many people think of hell, the first image that comes to mind is fire. But Bible scholars explain something even deeper and far more frightening. The greatest suffering is not the fire, it is the separation. The Bible itself makes it clear that hell is, above all, the place where God is not. And that changes everything. Think of someone who has always lived far from the light. At first it seems like a choice, then it becomes a habit. And finally, it becomes total isolation. Hell is that taken to the extreme. It's not just physical pain, it's complete absence of love, peace, and hope. It's like being stuck forever in a place where there are no hugs, forgiveness, comfort, or new beginnings. Theologians explain that the fire described in the Bible represents real suffering, yes, but what truly destroys is the definitive loss of God's presence. Here on earth, even those who don't believe still feel something of Him, a moment of joy, a gesture of kindness, a chance to change. In hell, this no longer exists. It is the end of all opportunity. To better understand, imagine a child lost in a dark place with no one to call, no one to hear. The fear doesn't come from the darkness itself, but from loneliness. The Bible describes hell as this eternal state of spiritual solitude. It's not senseless punishment. It's the end result of a lifetime of choosing to stay away from the light. This makes us realize something important. Hell doesn't start suddenly. It is built little by little. Every time someone rejects good, ignores the call, and prefers to walk alone. God doesn't push anyone away. People are the ones who drift away, step by step. And here's the chilling part. If the greatest suffering is separation, then the greatest gift is closeness. That's why the Bible insists so much on warning us, not to instill empty fear, but to prevent a loss that cannot be undone. Because as long as there is a warning, there is still a way back. The Bible already warned that a time would come when people would no longer want to hear certain truths. A time when difficult teachings would be set aside and replaced by more pleasant words. Experts call this a clear sign of the end times, not because the world would end overnight, but because the truth would begin to be rejected little by little. This warning wasn't about a lack of information, but about an unwillingness to listen. The Bible describes people who would choose comforting messages, but avoid those that awaken conscience. And when we look at today, it's impossible not to see this similarity. Talking about love is easy. Talking about choices and consequences is not so readily accepted. Theologians explain that in the end times, the problem will not be the absence of faith, but an incomplete faith. A faith that accepts promises but rejects warnings. It's like wanting to hear only half the story. The good part is pleasing, the serious part is unsettling, and therefore many prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. The forgetting of hell fits perfectly into this scenario, not because it ceased to be true, but because it became too difficult a truth. The Bible was not wrong in warning us. It showed that a time would come when humanity would choose comfort over clarity. Imagine a teacher announcing an important test. Some students pay attention. Others pretend not to hear because the announcement is time-consuming. The test still exists, whether they like it or not. In the same way, biblical warnings remain valid, even when ignored. And here's the point that grabs attention: when a truth begins to be avoided by many at the same time. That's no coincidence. It's a sign that something spiritual is weakening. Therefore, the Bible not only spoke of hell, it warned that one day people would stop talking about it. And this silence was already written long before it happened. There's a simple question that many scholars ask, and it's hard to ignore once you hear it. If hell weren't real, why would Jesus warn so forcefully? Think about it calmly. Warning about something that doesn't exist wouldn't be love. It would be cruelty. And everything Jesus taught always went in the opposite direction of cruelty. Jesus never deceived anyone. He didn't use harsh words without reason. When he spoke of forgiveness, it was to heal. When he spoke of love, it was to save. So, when he spoke of hell, it was for the same reason. Protect experts explain that warnings only make sense when there is real danger. No one puts up caution signs where there is no risk. Imagine an adult telling a child, "Don't go near that place, it's dangerous." If we later discovered there was no danger at all, that warning would be unfair. But when the danger is real, the warning is a gesture of care. With Jesus, it was exactly like that. His warnings did not take pleasure in fear. They were driven by the urgency of salvation. Some people say that he exaggerated to teach moral lessons. But think about it. Why exaggerate the most serious issue of all? Why insist so many times on something that doesn't exist? Theologians agree that this doesn't fit with Jesus' character. He didn't create imaginary threats. He revealed real consequences. And there's another important point. Jesus spoke of hell, even knowing that it would alienate some. If it were merely symbolic, he could have chosen milder words, but he didn't, because hiding the truth would be worse than causing momentary discomfort. This leads us to a conclusion that grabs our attention. Either Jesus was telling the truth or he was deceiving. people, and those who know his message know that deception was never part of it. Therefore, the warning cannot be dismissed. It exists because the risk exists. Ignoring the warning doesn't change the outcome, it only prevents the person from preparing. And perhaps that's why this topic still bothers us so much, because it reminds us that choices matter a lot. The Bible never left this matter confusing. It didn't use hidden words or difficult to understand warnings. On the contrary, she was clear, direct, and repeated the warning several times. What is unclear today is not the message itself, it's people's decisions regarding it. The truth remains written. What has changed is the willingness to accept it. When we read the scriptures carefully, we realize that hell was never presented as a legend, myth, or invention to control people. It appears as a spiritual reality linked to human choices. The Bible shows two paths, two directions, two destinies. It doesn't force anyone. It only reveals the consequences. And that's what makes it all so serious. The problem is that deciding takes work. It's easier to say it doesn't exist, that it's an exaggeration, that it's a thing of the past. But denial doesn't erase it. Ignoring it doesn't cancel it. It's like closing your eyes to a precipice and pretending it's gone. The fall is still there, even if no one wants to look. Experts explain that the Bible has always placed responsibility in the hands of humankind. God warns, guides, calls, waits, but the final choice is never imposed. And that's where the most uncomfortable point lies. Eternity is not decided by chance, but by daily choices. Perhaps that's why this topic causes so much discomfort, because it removes the person from the position of spectator and places them in the position of responsibility. You can't blame the weather, the church, the family, or the world. The decision is personal, and that's more frightening than any description. The Bible was too clear to be ignored. The warning was given. The path was shown. Modern silence does not change the ancient truth. It only reveals those who prefer not to face it. And here is the final question that keeps echoing. If the truth was announced with such clarity, what is each person going to do with her? Because after hearing it, no one can say they didn't know. If this message has stirred something within you, don't ignore it. Profound truths don't always comfort, but they liberate. The Bible was clear. Warnings were given, and silence was never a safe option. Here, we don't sugarcoat what needs to be said. We reveal what needs to be heard. Subscribe to the channel now to continue receiving prophetic messages, spiritual warnings, and biblical truths that many avoid. Leave a comment, share what this message made you reflect on. Your participation helps this truth reach more people. Activate the bell and walk with us while there is still time to listen.
Hear the true prophetic message.